Thanks everyone for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about how continuous delivery makes DevOps awesome. So I'm Nicole Forsgren. I am the CEO and Chief Scientist of DevOps Research and Assessment. It's a joint venture with me, Gene Kim, Jez Humble, and we're the lead investigators and primary authors behind the State of DevOps report. So if any of you are familiar with that, who here has heard of the State of DevOps report? Okay, a few hands. So we do primary research basically behind DevOps. So we look at what drives making software development delivery awesome. And not just one-off stories and anecdotes, although I love anecdotes, but the plural of anecdote isn't anecdata. Because I really want to know what makes software development delivery awesome. And so much of this comes back to an article that was written in 2003 by Nicholas Carr. This showed up in Harvard Business Review in 2003. And he said, IT doesn't matter. He didn't just say IT doesn't matter. The title of the paper was IT doesn't matter. Well, that sucks, right? We can just stop working. We can go be baristas. Suddenly, it all gave everyone an excuse to think that IT was a cost center. Who here's heard that? Who hears that way too many times? I've heard this so often. The challenge, though, is that at the time, Nicholas Carr had a really good point. And it was because we were basically doing IT wrong. We were doing it differently. And so what we're going to talk about today is this. We're going to talk about IT does matter because times have changed and IT has changed. So we're going to talk about how DevOps is good for organizations, DevOps is good for IT, but why it's different and why DevOps is doing things differently and why it's driving this change, and what it really takes. So it takes technical practices in continuous delivery. It takes management practices through lean management, and it takes culture and identity. So when Nicholas Carr said IT doesn't matter, he sort of had a point. And what he meant was that you can't just buy a server and throw it in a closet and give it really pretty uplighting, right? These are Facebook servers. Because our competitor could buy the same server and throw it in the same closet and give it really pretty uplighting. Or they could buy a competitor server and throw it in a different closet. Or we could even do hard things, right? We could buy ERP systems, but anyone else could do a similar hard thing. It didn't give us competitive advantage. It didn't give us sustainable competitive advantage. It was called the productivity paradox, because all it did was, the only thing computers did was do these hard things a little bit faster, right? Like no one should be doing accounting by hand. It just helped us do hard things a little bit faster. And so what we were doing was hard things a little bit faster. We were spending money on technology and then leaving it alone. So we were only doing the technology piece. And so if you only spend money on the technology piece, anyone else can spend money on the technology piece and leave it alone. Or if you only spend money on the management and process piece, if we only do Agile and suddenly do our meetings standing up instead of sitting down, we don't get any better. Or if we only do the culture piece and do beer and pizza on Fridays and ignore the technology piece and the culture piece, or the management piece, nothing actually gets better. We don't get that competitive advantage. And if we do, it lasts us a few months until all of our competitors do the same thing. We don't get the sustained competitive advantage. And so what it takes for these improvements to trickle all the way down to the bottom line is we have to do all three. It's tricky and it's difficult and it's kind of hard, but if we do all three, it can make a big difference. So we started seeing this show up in 07 and 08 and 09 in what so many of us kind of call unicorn companies, right? We started seeing it show up in web shops. But now we're seeing it really show up in enterprises as well. So to kind of summarize, we have to see all three, okay? We're seeing we need the technical practices seen in continuous delivery. We need the management practices seen in lean management principles, and we have to see organizational culture. Now, our research shows that these drive organizational performance and IT performance. Our research has shown this show up 3 or 4 years in a row consistently. The exciting thing is that we're also seeing this show up and be replicated in other research. Places like MIT and Harvard are seeing similar results. So, DevOps is good for organizations. What do I mean by this? High-performing organizations are twice as likely to exceed profitability, productivity, and market share goals. We're also seeing 50% market cap growth over the previous 3 years. I do have a little asterisk there. That's because I can only find those results for companies that are large enough to be traded on the New York Stock Exchange. But this is really, really exciting. I did have these results like double-checked by my friends that work in hedge funds, but it's there. So this is awesome. For those of you that only wanted to see this slide, like, you can go, but this is awesome, right? This is there. If we do DevOps right, this shows up in the bottom line. So, DevOps is good for IT organizations. So high-performing IT contributes to your organizational performance. What do I mean by IT performance, though? IT performance is your ability to deliver quality code with both throughput and stability. So IT performance, I measure with 4 things: throughput and stability. So for throughput, I measure that with deploy frequency. So when the business demands, it's no longer a technical constraint. Lead time for changes, code commit to code deploy. My 2 stability measures are MTTR and change fail rate. The reason I choose these 2 measures is for a couple of reasons. One is that your speed metrics speak really, really well to your developer community, right? This is what developers want to do. They want speed, they want change. Your stability metrics speak really well to your ops folks, right? We want stability, don't change my infrastructure, don't change what I'm doing. They also are intentioned really well. It's hard to game one without gaming the other. The other thing that's really interesting here is that I see these move together. High-performing IT organizations get everything. They do both of these, all 4 of these, right? The speed and the stability. They do them all really well in statistically significant ways. Low performers do all of them pretty sucky. Medium performers are middle of the pack on everything. I don't see trade-offs. You know the whole strategy, like we've all sort of been like hinted where like in order to get stability, you kind of have to tamp down on speed. I don't see it. In over 20,000 data points over several years, I don't see it anywhere. So, here's what I see. High-performing DevOps teams are more agile. So when I compare the high performers and the low performers, by the way, so I throw all these numbers in there and I like let the stats tell me what happens. The high performers all hang out together. There's one group that's all hanging out together. There's another group hanging out together in the middle, another group hanging out together in the bottom. I'm super creative, so I call them high and medium and low, right? Okay, so the high performers, I compare the high performers and the low performers. When I compare high and low, high performers see 200 times more frequent deployments. When I compare high and low performers, I see over 2,500 times shorter lead times. Code commit to code deploy. These are staggering, staggering results. Okay, they're also more reliable. So I see 24 times faster recovery from failures. So MTTR. When I look at my change fail rate, high versus low performers, this is any kind of service incident outage. This doesn't even mean that like your infrastructure came down, because let's be real, like we can't deal with service outages, but any kind of service incident, 3 times lower. This is super important. DevOps promises and delivers more throughput and stability in tandem. ITIL has suggested, right? I'm not going to say that they have to, right? Suggested that we have to have trade-offs. I'm not seeing trade-offs anywhere in the data. I have this in peer review, okay? I'm not seeing trade-offs anywhere. So let's talk about what this means for us. High-performing DevOps teams, I just talked about these stats. I'm seeing 200 times more frequent deployments, over 2,500 times faster lead times. Think about what this means for your own organizations. New content delivery, value and savings around A/B testing, value around speed to market. Let's think about the crazy case where you have 0 competitors. You probably still have to deal with compliance and regulatory situations. You still have to deal with security. You probably still want to pivot and delight your customers. There are still situations where we want to make our customers happy. So many times we put features into place where we know that they're making our customers happy, right? How often do we code features that we know make our customers super happy? All the time, right? We only code features that make our customers happy. We actually suck at this, by the way. We are not very good at this. So Ronnie Kohavi was at Google for years, and then he went over to Microsoft. And he was in charge of putting the experimentation platform into place. And he found that evaluating well-designed and executed experiments that were designed to improve a key metric, only 1/3 were successful at improving that key metric. And this is Microsoft. They've been in this business for years. If anyone knows what their customers want, it's probably Microsoft. They kind of suck at that. 1/3 improved that key metric. 1/3 delivered the value that they expected. 1/3 were like a net nothing. 1/3 decreased value. On a whole, if you implemented everything, you did about nothing. So we may as well just go to the beach, take a vacation. How valuable would it be if you can implement systems so that you know exactly what you're doing? And think of this another way. If we can deliver code very quickly, get that feedback from our customers, and be able to reverse that. How quickly can you pivot if we can only release code once or twice a year? What happens if we actually get that feedback from our customers and we realize that that feature that we thought was amazing is not amazing, but it takes us 6 months to reverse that feature? You can't pivot if you can't change your code. That's really, really difficult. Okay, so let's also think about this. High-performing DevOps teams are more reliable. So what does this mean about value and savings around our reliability? Value and savings around our uptime. We also have compliance and security, but there's even reputation around uptime and compliance and security. We can think about what happened when Sony was hacked, and then when Sony was hacked again, and then when Sony was hacked again, and then was hacked again. And then what happened when their competitors were not hacked? There is real value about reputation and not getting hacked, or even just recovery from hacking. A great example here was Netflix. Is anyone here familiar with the Amazon outage that happened? So Amazon came down, and Netflix did not come down. Amazon did not go down when Netflix did not go down when Amazon went down. There was a big conspiracy that Netflix had their own special cache of servers. Turns out, Netflix was just prepared. They had been preparing for outages for years. They finally wrote up a blog post saying, no, we didn't have our own special cache of servers. It wasn't that we're their biggest customer. We were just prepared. We have this thing called Chaos Monkey, which is now open source, by the way. You don't choose Chaos Monkey chooses you. It randomly kills instances. So they were prepared for it. The interesting thing that happened is that they were 2 hours in to the Amazon outage before they even noticed. They were 5 hours in before they declared a SEV1 incident. Another good example here was Heartbleed. When Heartbleed came out, the two biggest places that it hit were the Canadian Tax Agency and a very large hospital throughout North America. When it hit, it took 2 weeks between it being very public and it actually impacting the hospital. An executive for the hospital said, fixing it as soon as possible or having compensating controls in place days before could have saved this entire breach from occurring in the first place. Days before, but it took 2 weeks for them to actually be breached. If you have the ability to address security incidents, you're really at an advantage. So, here's what we know so far. IT performance is comprised of both throughput and stability, and both are possible without trade-offs. I see this in the data. I have over 20,000 data points covering several years. IT performance contributes and is predictive of organizational performance, profitability, productivity, and market share. So, what drives IT and organizational performance? Okay, step 1, we know what IT performance is. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. No laughs? Germans laughed at that joke, come on. Okay, so we know continuous delivery is important, right? Here are the things that we know are predictive of IT performance through a few years of research that we've done so far. We know that effective test data management is very important. We know that test and deployment automation is important. We know trunk-based development is important. That's Jez Humble's favorite. Every once in a while we get questions, but we know that have found that trunk-based development is predictive. Continuous integration, version control, and shifting left on security. Today, I'll give a couple examples for effective test data management and test and deployment automation. So the first example I will pull out of Nordstrom. So the example here comes out of the quality engineering team. Quality engineering is a shared service for developers, QA, and line of business teams at Nordstrom. They systematically evaluated their processes and they realized that test data was a huge bottleneck for them. It really was like limiting what they were doing. So they pulled together a team to evaluate how they could fix this. They were using CA service virtualization performance. An analysis, they pulled together a team and they showed that some of the key activities for this team in TDM were test data masking and subsetting, test data automation, and integration with tooling. And it really helped them pull together what they could help these teams to do. Some of the key outcomes for Nordstrom here were faster time to market, improved quality and customer experience, and significant productivity improvements and savings, and improved testing efficiencies. It really helped drive productivity improvements for this team. Another great example here was AutoTrader. So AutoTrader went from releasing web services 4 times a year to almost weekly. This was a huge improvement and a move to address a competitive market in a really, really complex environment. They also moved to support several platforms. It was really exciting for the team, but that also meant that they had to support automated testing across a really, really complex landscape. So it really made their automated testing really, really, really important for them. Absolutely important. So they used a DevOps approach to unify teams, and they used CA service virtualization. Using these principles, AutoTrader was able to reduce test, build, and deploy times from weeks to just minutes. They also decreased software defects by 25%. I really love this quote here. Adam Mills said, by getting new releases and services out the door quickly, we can provide a better experience to millions of car buyers and sellers to continue to differentiate ourselves in a competitive market. That's the other reason I really love the DevOps movement, is because it helps us create value for the business and value for our users. So, thing I also really love about continuous delivery, it makes our work better. It also makes our work feel better. Something that we found in our research is that it doesn't just improve IT performance, it decreases burnout and deploy pain. So I gave this talk at a conference once, or a version of this talk, and someone ran up to me afterwards from Microsoft and he said, oh my gosh, you have to take a look at some of the results that we found at Microsoft. And he showed me a version of his talk. And Microsoft Engineering DevOps Lessons, a talk was given at DevOps Days London 2016. They took a look at some of their work-life scores. Before continuous delivery, their work-life scores were 38%. After implementing continuous delivery, their work-life scores jumped to 75%. So we found it across several thousand teams around the world. Microsoft found it as well. By improving your technical practices, you improve the lives of all of your technical staff as well. I don't know about you, but like right now I do research. I used to be one of those technical staff on the line, and I know there's a piece of me that's like, I used to work all night. I used to burn the midnight oil. I used to burn myself out. You know what though? I have those stories that I used to share. That also sucks. Like, I want my life to be better. I like having exciting technical work, and I like being able to go home at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night and have a better life. So what else drives IT performance? We've covered the technical pieces. Let's also take a look at the lean management practices. These include use of effective WIP limits. WIP is work in process. Visual displays, monitoring tools, gathering, monitoring, and implementing customer feedback, use of small batches, and making work visible through the value stream. The ones that I'll cover today are visual displays and making that work visible through the value stream. One of my favorite examples is some of the work that Etsy does. Mike Rembetzi, former VP of Operations at Etsy, said in an interview once, if it moves, graph it. They have this really great tool that they've built there where once you deploy anything to the system, it graphs it automatically. All of these vertical lines that you see, once they've pushed code, it adds a vertical line. You can take a look at the graph and you can see what it does to your system. So you can see how it visualizes everything. If the graph drastically changes once you push code, you can see what happens and you can go take a look. Also, once you've done a bunch of work for the day and you're not sure what to do next, you can go take a look at a wall of monitors, and if a graph changes and looks kind of weird, you can go decide what your next piece of work should be based on what those graphs look like. ASR is another great example. ASR is one of the largest insurance and financial providers in the Netherlands. ASR used CA Agile Requirements Designer to create flowcharts. And they used this to show work as it moved throughout the value stream. We've found this to be a really great predictor of IT performance because everyone can see how the work moves and they can see how their own work contributes. So they did this. They were able to leverage insights from all of the stakeholders, business, test, IT. The teams could all see and understand the changes made to the requirements and the impact it would make through the whole stream. Using this principle, they were able to reduce time preparation significantly, release software with no incidents, and deliver on time and on budget. The project manager said, one of the greatest effects is that we're now asked much earlier by the business to participate in the requirements gathering process. The great thing here is that everyone feels buy-in to the process. We all feel like we're a part of making something great and we're all part of the organization. Again, lean management practices make our work feel better. We see a predictive relationship here. By using these tools and by using these processes, it actually decreases burnout. So it makes the work better and it makes the work feel better. I got a great quote one time from Julia Wester. She was talking backstage at a conference once about her experience at Turner Sports. She said, I was trying to figure out why my team was working themselves to death but not getting anything done. By implementing WIP limits, we were able to focus on our work. Finishing work feels better than sprinting and feeling like a hero in the moment because that's only a moment. But wait, there's more. I really love this piece as well. because CD and lean management practices also improve our culture and identity. And I've kind of hinted at this for a minute, because these also improve both our IT performance and our organizational performance. And so I'll touch on these as well. So these are predictive. All of these arrows here, by the way, are predictive relationships. So they impact, they drive, they predict. From a statistical point of view, this is much more than just correlation. So I mentioned previously that we do the research behind a bunch of this work. I have a background in academia, I have a PhD. When I first started this work, I was actually a tenure track professor. So this is much more than just a regular like marketing report. So I'll talk about a couple different things here. First is a Westrom organizational culture measure, and then we'll also get into identity. So Westrom organizational culture, this is kind of exciting for me. This is actually based on the work of a sociologist named Ron Westrom. He started doing this work in other highly complex, high-risk fields that predict outcomes, that predict performance outcomes. They also help you understand what happens when things go wrong. Does this sound like IT? Totally, right? So we adapted this for use in the study. We found it to be highly predictive of both IT and organizational performance for 3 years in a row. My nerd moment came when Dr. Westrom contacted me several months ago and said, I hear you've been using my work in some of your studies. Can I take a look? And so I sent him what I've been doing, and he said I was doing it right. Yay! I was super excited. So here's what we find. He came up with a typology of what organizations look like and what it looks like when you have a high trust, high information flow organization. So he broke it down into 3 different types. The first is a pathological organization. This is typified by low cooperation, the messenger is shot, bridging is discouraged, so high silos, failure leads to scapegoating, and novelty is crushed. Who here has a friend that works in an organization that sounds like this? Okay, we have some hands. The second is a bureaucratic organization. This is very, very rule-centric. There is some modest cooperation. Messengers are neglected. There are very narrow responsibilities, very highly defined. Bridging might be tolerated. Failure leads to justice. And novelty can lead to problems, right? Like you do your job. Who here has a friend that works in this type of an organization? Okay. Oh, by the way, across the years of studies we have done, about 55% falls into this category. About 1/3 falls into pathological. A generative organization. This is a high trust, performance oriented organization. This is high cooperation. Messengers are trained. But when I say messengers are trained, we actually train people. We ask them to come tell us when something is wrong, because this leads opportunities for learning and growth. Risks are shared. Bridging is encouraged, right? So we really, when we talk about breaking down the walls, high cooperation, failure leads to inquiry. Novelty is implemented. Who here has a friend, or they themselves maybe work in this organization? Okay, we see about 25% working here. We see high statistical significant differences here among high, medium, and low performing IT organizations here. And this is highly predictive, again, of both IT performance and organizational performance here. And this is, again, also highly correlated in several other fields as well, such as healthcare, aviation, nuclear fields. Anything that is highly complex and high risk. The other thing that we took a look at was identity. And this should be really, really interesting for those of us who are interested in hiring, retaining, and maintaining a good quality workforce. Who here wants to retain and hire and keep all of your best technical folks, right? This is so important right now. So we found that good, strong technical and lean management practices leads to strong identity. So when we take a look at these items, this was adapted from some prior literature. I'm glad I choose to work for this organization than another company. I talk this organization with my friends as a great company to work for. I'm willing to put in a great deal of effort beyond what's normally expected. I find that my values and my organization's values are very similar. In general, the people employed at my organization are working toward the same goal, and I feel my organization cares about me. So this is really similar to employee net present NPS, employee NPS. We found this to be highly correlated with eNPS, and also eNPS is found in other studies to be very predictive of organizational revenue. So having strong technical practices and good technical culture and strong lean management practices predicts identity. This helps you attract and retain good technical talent. And I don't know about you, but hiring is a big deal right now. This also backs up really interesting things that the Google researchers found. Is anyone here familiar with this study? So Google expected to find the ideal team makeup for like the best high-performing teams. And they thought it would be like a few Node.js programmers and an R programmer and like a project manager across, I think, 36,000 of their people. Nope, not at all. Do you want what it comes down to? Team dynamics. Far and above, the number one thing is psychological safety. Number 2, dependability. 3, 4, and 5, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. Our statistical analysis shows that those first 2 items load very strongly, which means that they stack, they kind of lean against those Westrum items, which makes sense because Westrum is all about trust and information flow, psychological safety and dependability. Those bottom 3 items load, they stack very heavily with identity. The meaningfulness of your work, right? Meaning, impact, structure, and clarity. I know what I do, I can trust my team, my values align with my organization. So many people are finding that I need to have high trust, value in my work, I know that my work is meaningful. The culture is important and it predicts IT performance and organizational performance. So, we see these a couple other places as well. I love this quote from Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit. He says, by installing a rampant innovation culture, we performed 165 experiments in the peak 3 months of tax season. Well, first of all, like a few years ago, this would have been crazy talk. Like, who does experiments in the peak 3 months of tax season? But when else are you going to do experiments? We don't want to be doing experiments in November and December because we don't want to be experimenting in November and December because that's not tax season. That's not even extension season. Extension season's October 15th. So those are not the people we want to be experimenting on. And then he says, our business result, conversion rate of the website is up 50%. Employee result, everyone loves it because their new ideas can make it to market. I also love this because he points out a couple things. He points out that the organization has made money. But do you know what else he points out? The employees are happy. The employees are engaged. The employees are excited. And it's absolutely paying off. This is another great quote from Amazon. So who here is familiar with the shopping cart on Amazon and the recommendations that you can get on checkout? This is a really, really interesting story. So as we go to the grocery store or the convenience store, there's always like magazines and candies and everything, right? It's a great idea. But it's a little different because like we're actually physically trapped. The likelihood that I'm gonna put my shopping cart down and leave is low because that kind of sucks. But online, I can have clicked and then I can get like, look, shiny, squirrel, I can get distracted and I can leave or I can get busy or I can shut my laptop. Something can happen and I can just stop shopping. But Greg Linden thought this would be a great idea to have recommendations in my shopping cart. And in this case, it's an even better idea because instead of just having the same magazines and sweets for every single person, it can be recommendations as I check out. So he coded up this prototype and he walks into his senior vice president's office and he says, hey, SVP, dear Mr. SVP, I've got this great idea. As people are checking out, I want to give them recommendations. And his SVP's like, totally see where you're going with this. No, absolutely not. Because they might get distracted, they might leave. Greg Lind is like, oh, this is how I imagine it in my head. Probably not like this, but I'm gonna pretend, oh. Walks back to his office. Typey, A/B test, push into prod. Remember, his SVP just said no. Who here has a friend that can code up an A/B test and push it into prod without getting fired after being said no by your SVP? Not me, and I'm my own boss. Like, there's no way. Like, he waits a few weeks, he goes back to the SVP with data. The revenue has gone up by a few percent. And at Amazon scale, a few percent is millions of dollars. Like, this is massive. It's huge. Greg Linden writes this up in his blog later. I think building this culture is the key to innovation. Creativity must flow from everywhere. Whether you are a summer intern or the CTO, any good idea must be able to seek an objective test, preferably a test that exposes the idea to real customers. Everyone must be able to experiment, learn, and iterate. So if we think back to that Western culture, was this a high trust information flow? What if it had been a failure? Would that have led to inquiry? Was that responsibility? What does this mean? It's kind of an interesting question to ask about what sort of a culture are we creating where we work? So here's what we've covered today. IT does matter. Maybe it didn't matter in 2003, not the way it does now. Maybe IT was a cost center, but things are drastically different now. We are driving value. We are absolutely contributing to the business and what we do now. Times at IT have changed. DevOps is good for organizations. DevOps is good for IT. But what drives this change and what's absolutely important and what we have to have are all three things. We have to have technical practices and automation and what we call continuous delivery, and comprised of all of those things I've talked about. We also have to have those management practices, which really come from lean management practices and principles and how we're applying them now to software. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have single piece flow? What does it mean to have WIP limits? And how can we apply this now? Also, culture and identity. For more information, you can go to devops-research.com, sign up for our upcoming ROI white paper and get peer-reviewed research. We also help with assessment, benchmarking, and prioritization. Thank you. I've got about 5 minutes if anyone wants to come up with, I think we probably have time for one question, or you can find me off stage. Thank you so much for your time.